BYU sports a sterling 5-0 record. They're ranked 18th in the country, but the next 6 games the Cougars will play will define this season for Kalani Sitake and company.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 14-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider, your host here on this podcast, and as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. All right, coming up on today's show, we are going to look at Kalani Sitake and the BYU football program's next 6 games. Yeah, we're taking a whole half a season in one lump sum and examining why it's absolutely going to define the season despite an absolutely incredible start for BYU on this campaign. Then we'll continue that conversation partially by looking at 2 key players as to why BYU has started back-to-back seasons 5-0, looking back at Jake Retzlaff's first 5 games in 2024 as compared to what Bear Bachmeier has done through the first 5 games of 2025. And if there's any correlation between the two, then we'll finish up today's show talking about, well, the Colorado incident, but it has a more positive outcome, I think. And I think the notoriety or the public outcry has had some positive impacts, and we'll get into that. It's all ahead on today's show, and it's all brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and redeem the promo code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Get started today at Game Time or on the Game Time app. All right, let's dive right in on today's show. And BYU opens a stretch of 6 games beginning this weekend when they take on the Arizona Wildcats that, unlike the first 5 games, this is the most difficult stretch in quite some time. Aaron Roderick was on Coordinator's Corner yesterday, in fact, saying it's the most difficult stretch he believes in BYU football history. I don't think he's too far off, because think about the caliber of opponents BYU is going to face over the next 6 games. Yes, Arizona, they're an upstart this season. They're going to be a very tough out as BYU goes to Tucson this coming Saturday night. The following week, we found out it's a 6 o'clock Mountain Time kickoff from Lavelle Edwards Stadium in the annual rivalry game. That takes a lot out of both sides. And then the following week, BYU has to make a trek to the Midwest to take on Iowa State. They get a brief respite with a bye week in these after these next 3 games. Take a bye week, and then you head to Lubbock, taking on Texas Tech. You're home to TCU, and then you're at Cincinnati. And at that point, we're midway, if not late into November. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this. BYU's playing some really, really good ball right now. But these first 5 opponents, in my opinion, don't compare in the slightest to what BYU is going up against in their next 6. The record itself speaks for itself. 26-5, I believe, is the combined record of the next 6 opponents, while BYU's first 5 opponents are a combined 9-19. Those out there, the naysayers who said that BYU is not beating anybody and BYU might be a little bit of a paper tiger, I can understand why they believe that. A lot of metrics, if you look more at the advanced analytics, say that BYU is probably better than what we perceive them to be. The bigger point to be had here is inside the walls of the BYU football program, where it ultimately really matters, Kalani Sitake is preaching to his guys what he expects of them. If any of you watched The Cut last night, I would encourage you to do so every single week. It's got a lot of good insights on it, and I got to give a shout out to the entire BYU social media team, guys like Preston Crawley and the like. I got a little bit of an insight as to how many hours they put in. Essentially, that game for BYU ended Friday night. They get this out by Monday evening, and typically it's actually a tighter turnaround if it's a Saturday night game, trying to get it out by Monday evening. The man and the human hours that are put in to producing that, it is absolutely remarkable what they accomplish in literally it feels like 2 days' time. There's very little sleep. There's a whole lot of stress, but the nice part is the end product is always elite. There was a quote, and I wrote it down as best I could. It's not verbatim, but it comes from Kalani Sitake at the tail end of the cut last night. He says this, quote, "All the little stuff we do, ball security, etc., it may seem repetitive, but that stuff matters. We can't keep shooting ourselves in the foot and expect that we will just find a way to win. The teams in this league are really good, and we can't give them freebies. We got to eliminate that. We got to be disciplined in the red zone. You got to decide as a team to take the initiative to play your best right away." I think the slow start against Colorado and some of the issues, the ball security issues, if not the penalty woes against West Virginia, those are stuck in the craw of Kalani Sitake, and him being a head coach who has seen uber successful teams at BYU and some of the worst teams in BYU football history. Think about his 10 years now as BYU's head coach. He has had probably the worst single season in 50 plus years of BYU football. He's also had some of the single best seasons since 1996, if not 1984. He has seen the highs and the lows, and he knows what it takes to succeed. He watched his first iteration of the Big 12 go 5-7 after starting out a respectable 5-2 and then cratering down the stretch. He watched last year's team go through an incredible 9-0 start, falter a little bit, and then recover to finish 11-2 with an incredible bowl win. He wants this year's team to be as good, if not better, than that 2024 campaign, but he knows that the margin between finishing 5-7 and going 11-2, it's oh so fine. And that's why he is reiterating, and he's heading the cut to his guys to do the small things right. You can't fumble the football. You can't have false starts in the red zone. You can't find a way to shoot yourself in the foot, to use the expression that he used, and expect that you will claw your way out of this hole. BYU did that against Colorado. They held West Virginia at an arm's length, and that was not going to be that much of a contest because the West Virginia very well might be the worst team in the league, all due to injuries and the like right now. But the next 6 games for BYU, I'm not going to mince words. They are going to define the season, and BYU very easily could go 0-6, 6-0, or any combination in between that. That is how crazy this next 6-game stretch is. Will BYU, in my opinion, lose some of these games? Absolutely. I could very easily break down it and come down to a 3-3 record. There's also other things that the ball bounces their way. Like I said, they could go as good as 6-0, or if the ball doesn't bounce their way, they could go 0-6. The nice part is Kalani Sitake is preaching to his guys to focus on what they can control. And those are the small things: ball security, red zone efficiency, making sure that they do not hurt themselves in the process of trying to find victories. Arizona, in my opinion, might be the most winnable of the next 6 games. But that doesn't mean it's a gimme by any means. I know the FPI is out there saying BYU's favored to make a nice run here. You know what? Until you put the ball between the hashes and see how it all plays out, you can't count on anything. And I think this next 6 games absolutely will tell us everything we need to know about this year's squad, whether they finish an immaculate 12-0 or whether they finish potentially 6-6. Any of and all things are on the table here. But the nice part is, I know that Kalani Sitake has got his guys' best interest in mind, and the BYU team leadership, speaking of the players inside that locker room, they know what it takes. The vast majority of them saw the success and what it took to achieve that success last year. They're going to make sure that the guys who may not know are going to know, and I expect BYU will put a fight up every single week, even if they come up on the short end of some of these contests over the next half of this season. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about a guy who I think has an outsized role in the fortunes of the next 6 games for BYU. How does he compare to the guy that led BYU to 11-2 record last year in Jake Retzlaff? Well, we're examining Bear Bachmeier's stats, and if there's any correlation between these 2 5-0 starts in back-to-back seasons, we'll do that next. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Every day we make decisions, but on Prize Picks, being right can actually get you paid. Think about that. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. It's a fun, simple way to add more excitement to your football watching experience. You just pick more or less on player projections, as simple as that, like Josh Allen's passing yards or Saquon Barkley's rushing for a touchdown and a gazillion other options, and you're in the game. It's as simple as that. The best part is you can do it super quick, 60 seconds or less. You make your lineup in under a minute, and you're off and doing whatever else you got to do next. It added stacks just recently to Prize Picks, so you want to ride with a player, you can select their pass yards, rush yards, and touchdowns all in one lineup and see if it pays off for you guys. The best part is it's fun to follow other players in the app and copy their lineups with one click as well. And they also have the new injury reboot feature. If your player leaves early and doesn't return, it doesn't count against you. You can still win money. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code Locked On College. You get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's promo code Locked On College for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. It's all courtesy of Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of your patronage and being with us every single day here on the podcast. Another plug for you guys is subscribe, rate, and review. Share this with your family and friends. You help us continue to grow this audience. We're having a phenomenal 2025 and not looking to slow it down anytime soon. BYU football's heating up. Basketball is about here. So it's good time to get in with this. And this is original daily BYU content from your original daily BYU podcast, the Locked On Cougars podcast. Proud to be part of the Locked On podcast word. Of course, it is your team, speaking of the Cougars, every single day. All right, let's talk BYU stat projections. And looking back, BYU under Kalani Sitake has started 5-0 for the second time in back-to-back seasons in his tenure. The correlation between these two is not necessarily super straightforward because remember, last year, Jake Retzloff started the final 4 games of the ill-fated 2023 campaign where they came oh so close to getting to bowl eligibility, falling in double overtime to Oklahoma State. They stewed on that for an entire offseason and came out with renewed passion and fury that propelled them to an 11-2 campaign. Well, one of our insider group members, Tyler, asked me to do a comparison of the first 5 games from 2024 for Jake Retzloff when BYU once again started 5-0. As compared to this year with Bear Bachmeier under center, also leading BYU to a 5-0 record. So I dug in. I did my statistical analysis, and came down with these stats. So for the straight numbers, for the first 5 games of 2024, Jake Retzloff was 90 of 147 passing at 61.2%. Now, at the end of the season, he ended up dipping below 60% overall. He had 1,208 yards, 12 touchdowns against 5 interceptions, 34 carries, 156 yards rushing. That's an average of nearly 4.7 yards per carry, and 1 touchdown on the ground. His passer rating, efficiency rating came to 147.5, and the QB rating was 65.5, which comes from ESPN. And the overall opponent's record in 2024 through those first 5 games, a combined 13-12, so a game over 500. I already referred to BYU's first 5 opponents this year already being 9-19. So the comparison of the two opponents' records, not necessarily apples to apples here, but Bear Bachmeier, for his efforts through these first 5 games for BYU, he has completed 68.7% of his passes, 1,048 yards, 7 touchdowns against 1 interception, 49 carries, 206 yards at 4.2 yards per carry, as well as 5 touchdowns on the ground. His efficiency rating as a passer, 163.6, and a QB rating of 73.5. So, you want to play the numbers game. There are some that go in the favor of Jake, other ones that go in the favor of Bear Bachmeier, but the efficiency rating, the QB rating are the numbers that take all those in sum total and spit out that number, and it shows that Bear Bachmeier is playing better for BYU in 2025, albeit up against a far less stout schedule than BYU faced to start off in 2024. Does that mean that there's a correlation here that we're not seeing between these two quarterbacks? No, I don't think so. I think that Jake Retzloff, the numbers he had are a beneficiary directly of the 4 games he had before going into that 2024 campaign. Yes, he struggled mightily at the tail end of 2023. BYU as a team struggled mightily as they tried to find a way to get to bowl eligibility, but came up short. Bear Bachmeier, on the other hand, he showed up to BYU in June, worked his way up the depth chart very quickly, established himself as the best option for BYU, and pretty remarkable to consider where he was in the same time frame that Jake Retzloff was at this point in their respective BYU careers, and to see these numbers, both some correlation, but also some differences. I'm not going to say that Jake Retzloff wouldn't have had better numbers this year had he been under center for BYU. I'd be hard-pressed to say that he wouldn't, because senior quarterbacks routinely in BYU football history put together some of the best statistical seasons, if not their best statistical season in a Cougar uniform. The incredible part about this is we are looking at a true freshman in Bear Bachmeier, whose best days in many respects are fully expected to be ahead of him. And he is already, I believe, on par, if not slightly ahead of Jake Retzloff just a season ago when Jake was a junior. Jake had played a lot more games as a college quarterback, a lot of them at the junior college level, as compared to Bear Bachmeier. Remember, Bear Bachmeier, I think, was his senior season. He missed a significant portion of his senior campaign in high school due to injury. So these numbers, Yeah, you may quibble with them back and forth, but the nice part is it shows that BYU has created a system under Aaron Roderick where quarterbacks can thrive no matter what the circumstances may be. Now, do they look a little bit different sometimes in practice? Absolutely. But the bread and butter, the tried and true method that Aaron Roderick has established over multiple years now, he's put two quarterbacks in the NFL so far. Who knows if Jake Retzlaff ultimately gets to the NFL, because BYU could partially claim credit for him making it, having spent time in Provo and also now at Tulane. If Bear Bachmeier down the line ends up being an NFL quarterback, and everything looks like BYU has created a quarterback-friendly system, but it's also a quarterback system that is going to help them have success, speaking of the football program as a whole. Tyler made an interesting point and asking me to look at these two because, as he mentioned, he wanted to say, hey, can you look at the numbers, and then do you think that it changes anything with regards to how he should perceive these two teams, speaking of the 2024 Cougars versus the 2025 Cougars? I don't necessarily think it changes much in my mind on that front, but the bigger point to be had here is it shows that BYU has built a program. I talk about the whole sum total of its parts. It's not just a quarterback-centric team. It's not just a defensive-laden. It's a team, and Kalani Sitake talks about this often, about playing complementary football. They have got one of the premier defensive coordinators in Jay Hill that is coordinating an all-time BYU defense. It looks very much the part. Has it slacked off a little bit in the West Virginia game? Yeah, but Kalani Sitake in the cut, as I kind of alluded to earlier on in today's podcast as well, he talked about the fact that he wants the second stringers got to be better about that. He talked about tackling, and he said guys were flopping all over the place. He said in the past about not giving up cheap points. You guys did that exact thing against West Virginia. The satisfaction level is never attainable, it feels like, in this football program, nor should it be. Flipping over to the offense, Aaron Roderick said it on Coordinator's Corner yesterday. He feels like he put Bear Bachmeier in situations of the two turnovers that Bear had. He felt like we're on him. Do I take that as Aaron Roderick saying that he's a bad coordinator? No. Those of you who are going to take that, I'm sure will take it that way. I think it's more that Aaron Roderick was standing up for his guy and covering for a young man that he believes has got all the potential in the world and made a pair of mistakes that BYU will be better about. Guess what? The nice part is BYU is 5-0. Life is good in Provo. And once again, the opportunity exists staring BYU in the face, beginning with Arizona this coming weekend, to assert themselves as truly one of the teams that can challenge for Big 12 supremacy. We had Shahan Jayaraja from CBS Sports. He obviously covers football at a national level, but he covers the Big 12 in earnest, living down there in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, on with DJ and PK on the KSL Sports Zone yesterday. And his exact words, he was, quote, excited, unquote, about BYU. The national media is starting to wake up and pay attention to what BYU is doing. And I think a big portion of it is because Bear Bachmeier, he is such a young talent, but he's putting up numbers that are showing that he could be the key differentiator to why BYU has its ultimate success and potentially its ultimate failure on this season. I love what Bear Bachmeier has brought to BYU. He is an unflappable young man by all respects. He made two gaffes in that game against West Virginia. It didn't faze him at all. He bounced back in incredible fashion from both of them. That's what you want to see from seasoned quarterbacks, let alone a true freshman. So the good news is BYU is in a very, very advantageous spot right now, and I wouldn't bet against the Cougars potentially making a run here, even as the schedule gets more difficult. But Bear, he's got to be equal to the task. He's got to help lift BYU to that next level that they need him to go to if they want to succeed this season. All right, finishing up the show coming up next. Some changes at the University of Colorado. Also, a call from Arizona coach Brent Brennan for their fan base to not do what the Buffalo fans did in Boulder just a couple of weeks ago. Is this a good thing that there's some, I guess, public outcry and also maybe some help on the way for BYU? We'll examine that next as you roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. College football is back, and it could not be more exciting. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stand, there's just nothing like it, everybody. But let's be real. Actually getting your tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout, and it feels like a bevy of other issues with it. That's why I want you guys to do what I do and use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. The best part is you can jump in the app, and our friends down in Arizona, I saw tickets as low as $74 that you could capitalize on if you want to make the trip to Tucson this weekend. You can see the exact view from your seat before you buy them. And the best part is they also have zone deals. Pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save money in the process. Honestly, it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way I have bought tickets, and I want you guys to give it a shot as well. Take the guesswork out of buying your tickets and do it with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off in the Game Time app. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Square. Your favorite neighborhood spots are running on Square. All of us know our favorite neighborhood locales. Maybe they've been in a community for years. Maybe they're not necessarily have been there that long, but they are critical parts of the community that you call home. The best part about in Utah is we are very community oriented. We all know this in the great state of Utah. The nice part is there are places like J-Dogs, Communal, Black Sheep Cafe, and a bevy of others. Thrift Hood, if you want to get geared out for BYU events. All of these companies are running on Square. That's the best part about this. If you want to go and check out these community spots, I would encourage you to do so. I talk often about J-Dogs. I have been going to J-Dogs since they were in that little red shack just southeast of BYU campus. Now they have taken over the entire state. It's absolutely incredible to see the growth of that company. But the best part is I want you guys to take this ad as an excuse to go support your favorite local spot and have yourself a day in the neighborhood. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more now. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. It's all courtesy of Square, where they like to say, see you in the neighborhood. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you for being with us. Another plug for you guys to join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. You get the inside scoop on all things BYU sports. Just $5 a month. And the best part is you get a 14-day free trial before you charge a single penny. Join us today and get the inside scoop on all things BYU as a member of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, before we go on today's show, let's talk about some changes that are happening in the Big 12. Now, some of you might recall I had a pretty incredible segment that I did, and I lost my marbles a little bit just with my emotions. And it dealt with, obviously, the derogatory, if not, I would call them bigoted chants from the Colorado student section directed at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, the LDS Church, for its part, didn't really respond in mass. They've got a lot of things going on, as we all know. Situation in Michigan, the passing of President Russell M. Nelson. But we have seen changes from Colorado. They have installed, they're going to put as plainclothes police officers in the crowd to root out poor fan behavior at CU Boulder athletic contests. Now, does this do much for BYU? Maybe, maybe not. They did get fined $50,000 and get a public reprimand from the Big 12, but they are going to increase security personnel throughout the stadium, both inside and outside, including in the student section. As I mentioned, plainclothes police officers embedded in various sections throughout the stadium for immediate removals of fans. Now, I will say this. I saw at least, with my very own eyes, 3 different fans arrested, I believe, for public intoxication or other altercations while I was sitting in the stands at in Boulder for that game. I also saw photos. We have a connection with USA Today on the Locked On Podcast Network, and their photo deck from that game showed at least 2 other altercations that ended up with people in handcuffs. So there were people being policed, but obviously the chant emanating through that stadium, that's what stood out. They also are going to use an increase in security response teams throughout the stadium and installation of new technology to proactively monitor behavior throughout the stadium. I told you guys when I worked through the original renovation of the Delta Center years and years ago. They put in security systems in that arena that I can just tell you this much. They can identify down to an individual person, people who are poorly behaved, and I expect that Colorado's doing the same thing. Well, that brings us to this week as BYU goes to Arizona. Some of you might recall back during the basketball season, there were some derogatory/bigoted chants directed at BYU in the aftermath of their game down at the McKell Center. Well, Arizona apologized the night of that contest, issued another apology later on the next day, said it wouldn't happen again. And Brent Brennan, during his weekly press conference yesterday, had this to say, quote, "Let's be respectful in this thing. We're better than that, and let's be here and let's see a great game. Let's cheer on the Wildcats with everything we've got. Let's make it incredibly hard on BYU, but let's be respectful in the process." In other words, do not get us fined. Please don't make it about that, because his hope is that his Arizona team can beat BYU, knock them from the ranks of the unbeatens, 15 of them remaining across the country, including the Cougars. But he doesn't want the focus to be poor fan behavior. Colorado doesn't want that storyline from that game to have focused on that, but guess what? It did. It's simple fact of life. When fans behave poorly, guess what? It mars what should be a positive experience for everybody involved. There are a lot of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a lot of you call it the LDS Church, whatever reference you want to use, around this country, around the world, and they take offense when it goes from bleep BYU to bleep the Mormons. I know that some of you think there's no difference between the two. I believe there is a difference between the two. One's an institution, albeit owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the LDS Church. The other refers to a protected class of religion. I appreciate what Brent Brennan's trying to say here. He's trying to get it out in front of it and make sure that the fans know what the expectations are. He says, let's make this thing a hostile environment we know it can be, and I make it really challenging for our opponents when they get here. I think that's something we know that we experience every time we go on the road in the Big 12. We experienced it 2 weeks ago at Iowa State, sold out, rocking loud, hard to deal with. I think that's something we're absolutely capable of here. We also, as I said, added the caveat, do not cross that line. The Big 12 has laid it out. They have said in no uncertain terms, you cross that line, we will find you. We will not find you. That's Liam Neeson from Taken. We will fine you and we will publicly reprimand you. The other thing is there was a really great story written by Lincoln Roque. I think I got his last name right. It might be Rock. Talking about 3 different members of the LDS Church who are students at Colorado who feel like they've been alienated by their own student section for the slurs, the bigoted comments, and the statements that they made. They're talking about transferring from Colorado in the aftermath of this. There is the law of unintended consequences. Did every kid in that student section chanting what they chanted in Boulder mean what they said? No, I don't believe they did. But some of them absolutely did, because they wouldn't have started the chant if not. But it alienates people in that very student section. As one kid said, that he was waiting at a bus stop and said that other inebriated, I think it was, he said, Colorado students said, hey, my First Amendment rights is to put hands on anybody who says that was wrong. And this kid had worn a BYU sweatshirt, having been a BYU fan, albeit a student at Colorado. He immediately left that bus stop with that threat looming over him, took a taxi back to his dorm room to avoid any such confrontation. That's bad stuff. That's stuff you don't want to deal with. Sporting events are meant to be positive experiences. I appreciate the proactive measures. I guess they're more reactive, not proactive. The reactive measures that Colorado has taken here. And I said, okay, reactive from Colorado, but proactive from Brent Brennan in Arizona to curb this behavior. It shouldn't be part of sporting events. It should be a positive environment. You can boo all you want. You can say, hey, you suck. All that stuff's totally okay. But when you start denigrating an entire class, an entire religion, yeah, that crosses the line, and it shouldn't be part of our everyday lives and sporting events in particular. So I appreciate what Colorado is trying to do to make up for it. I also appreciate that Brent Brennan is trying to get out in front of this, make sure they don't have a repeat of multiple other incidences, because it's happened at Arizona football games in the past. Will it happen Saturday night? Who knows? But they have, I think, said their piece, speaking of Arizona, from their leadership, trying to say, do not cross this line, because $50,000 in the grand scheme of things in college athletics is a relative drop in the bucket, because we're talking about athletic departments that run hundreds of millions of dollars in their budgets. But still, it's money. And in this day and age where you're trying to scrounge up every red cent you can to fund NIL, find the best talent you can to bring into your university, well, that 50 grand could mean landing a kid versus not landing a kid. And you don't want to have to pay it out because of your fan base versus your team. It's something that absolutely comes into the calculus here. But I appreciate, once again, the measures being taken here. And I do think it means there's some proactive moves happening that are going to help out, hopefully curb what has been some pretty abhorrent behavior for multiple years, if not decades now, in BYU's direction. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of the show. I appreciate all of you for being with us. By the way, a couple of you said, hey, that grace under pressure statement you came up with in the moment, Jake, it's absolutely phenomenal. Well, guess what? It's something I think we all need to strive to live by, whether you're members of the Church of Jesus Christ or of Latter-day Saints or not. Grace under pressure can be tough to do. And I appreciate anybody who takes a moment to have reached out and talked about that with me. I appreciate all of it because it's far harder to do in practice than to talk about it. But I appreciate anybody and everybody who considers that. And should it happen on Saturday night, once again, take the high road, have some grace, and do it, as I mentioned, under the pressure cooker that otherwise might crush some other people and cause them to snap. All right, once again, that's going to do it for today's edition of the show. I appreciate all of you for being with us. Appreciate all of your support of the podcast. Coming up later today, going to have a special edition coming out. I did a one-on-one, a preview, I guess is the best way to call it, with Locked On College Basketball and Isaac Shade, talking all things BYU hoops. We look at the roster, we look at the schedule, we make predictions for the season ahead. It was a well-rounded and in-depth look at the BYU basketball program. I see that drop probably around midday today, so just keep your eye out for that if you want some BYU hoops talk. But as always, thank you for your thank you for your patronage of Locked On Cougars, subscribing, rating, reviewing, sharing with your family and friends. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, and come back tomorrow and be an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.